Get ready to uncover groundbreaking ideas, discover the hidden challenges, and explore the untapped potential of marketing in the digital age. This is FairPlay with Arun Kumar, the podcast that takes you on a journey into the impact of data and technology in marketing. Here's Arun.
My guest this week is Michelle McGuire Christian. Michelle's a principal at Deloitte Consulting, and she's the Chief Commercial Officer of ConvergeCONSUMER, where she leverages AI and machine learning to drive growth by creating deeper consumer connections. In her current role, Michelle is responsible for go-to-market strategies, deploying assets into the marketplace, and overall business growth for her clients. Michelle, welcome to FairPlay.
Thanks for having me.
So, Michelle, let me start off by asking the question which I love to ask people in your position because you've got such a bird's eye view of what's happening across a number of different industries. So I know we're well into 2024, but what are some of the big trends that you expect taking place in the space of data and marketing in 2024?
Yeah, I don't think you have to be Nostradamus to be able to predict that Gen AI is going to change the way we leverage data within organizations, ultimately democratizing data across any organization in terms of you don't have to be a data scientist now to be able to leverage the power of AI. I like to joke that at Deloitte we were garden variety AI before it was cool, but now with generative AI, we see folks leveraging the tools to enable them to become, desk side data scientists that didn't exist, as little as a year ago. So I see Gen AI changing the way we access data, but then I also see it changing the way marketers are engaging with data and leveraging it to do things like predictive segmentation and unsupervised clustering algorithms that tell me who my cohorts are, and the AI being able to name it, and there being an infinite number of cohorts, segments where, traditionally marketers had, 4 or 5 segments that they targeted, some as many as 30. But now with AI, we're seeing thousands of segments being created and auto-generating and labeling the behavior of those segments. That truly, I think, is going to fundamentally change the way that marketers do their job, which historically maybe they relied on agencies or they relied on a single data scientist in the marketing organization. Now, with that democratization of the tools, the data, the ability to do some of the advanced modeling, it's truly going to change the way they work in 2024.
And is there anything about the deployment of many of these tools that you see is going to be different from the way it's been going on so far? Like anything we are not predicting right now that you think we should look out for?
Well, I think organizations have to look out for the proliferation of tools, the readily available tools, the internet access tools, right? I think that organizations have to be careful from a cyber and a security perspective that your teams aren't giving access to, the core set of data by your team's leveraging open source tools, online tools. You have to seed them with those tools, but 2, you have to do it in a secure way that ultimately results in the preservation of your data, which in 2024, not that it hasn't been historically, but I see more and more data becoming the currency in which organizations traffic, because it's ultimately going to be the thing that changes the business. So treating it like the valuable asset that it is, I feel like organizations, marketing organizations in particular, are going to have to sit side by side with IT and with cyber and risk in order to prevent that from happening.
Got it. But since you've started with AI, and it's a topic that I really love jumping into, so let me just jump into that area straight off. Yeah. So one of the things that I always sort of wrestle with when we talk about AI is you spoke about segmentation, right? And it's always been the holy grail that we should be able to differentiate who's more valuable to a brand or to a company as opposed to others, and then be able to deliver messages that are appropriate to them. Do you see a mismatch between the analytics that happens up front, which clearly identifies the opportunities, but then when you go into the digital platforms, it all sort of mixes and becomes mulch, right? Like there are 250 segments and suddenly, the platforms are able to give you like 4 with any scale, and then the scale thing. So is AI looking to solve that problem on the other end? Because otherwise this really doesn't work, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the beauty of AI is it solves for that content supply chain through the ability to generate the message, the ability to generate the image. So it's not just solving for the modeling and the segmentation, it's solving for the supply chain. So to your point, I think historically those things were done in linear steps, right? It was, I do the segmentation, I create the cohorts, I then figure out next step would be what's their propensity, what's their product affinity, how do I figure out where they have the highest likelihood to purchase? And then to your point, it gets handed off to marketing execution systems to do the A/B testing, multivariate testing. And to your point, it likely gets diluted along the way. And we all know at the handoffs is where, where things bleed out. So what AI does is it a bit more machine learning, right? Is like, hey, I understand end to end what the need is, and I'm able to close loop, train the machines to be smarter to deliver on that value chain of segmentation, propensity, marketing execution in a way that historically we haven't, right? Or marketing had to heavily rely on IT to enable them to do that, or on an agency to do it. Now with AI, it enables them to generatively own that value chain from concept through to delivery, and then learn from the behavior on the execution system, whether it be online, in store, in app, always training the model to get smarter and to drive, meaningful future engagement in a way that frankly didn't exist a year ago.
Can I test one of my theories with you?
Sure.
And you can totally tell me that I'm totally wrong about this, by the way. So I'm not expecting you to say this is great, but I have this hypothesis that one of the things that we sort of told clients over the last 4 to 5 years was in anticipation of the cookies going away, and also in trying to get more of enterprise data systems together, which I always found very odd, were never connected. Like you would have one team doing website analytics and another team working with an agency to do performance media, and the two shall not meet, right?
Yeah.
So one of the common things that we always saw was there would be 2 different sets of infrastructure, 2 different sets of contracts. The CIO or CTO would own something, the CMO would own something, and then the agency would bring its own stack, some external publisher would bring something. Would it be true to say that if you used the right algorithms, rather than spending the money in trying to create uniform data infrastructure, you could actually have AI pick the relevant pieces of information it needs from these different sources, rather than me first having to invest in some enterprise data system that unifies all of these things together, which will take me 3 years to implement and probably $300 million. And then I will decide that I will put a generative layer on top of that. Is that outlandish to expect that we could probably get there?
I don't think it's outlandish. I will say, though, that what AI has enabled is our ability to do the merging, purging, hygiene in a way that didn't exist, right, a year ago. I think AI is still enabling some functions like IDR, identity resolution, for first, second, third-party data in a way that, data ingest, pipelines, cleanse, and hygiene becomes infinitely easier in a way that, I don't know that you'll ever be able to skip that step in terms of what is my good data, what's my golden record, what's my source of truth. I just think AI is going to enable that faster. But then to your point, once that piece is done, I do think that the AI and the machine learning gets smart enough to know where are the trusted sources, how do I pick them, and then how do I merge them in a way that I know moves the needle. And so to your point, is moving the needle sales conversion on a commerce platform? Is it, increased email click-through rate? Is it, to your point around programmatic, is it more effective targeting of ads to my intended audience that results in pull-through or conversion, whatever your conversion metrics might be? I feel like AI enables that in the future in a far more seamless way than exists today. And I think, to your point, it gets infinitely cheaper. I think, to your point, the days of the large data transformation initiatives starts to come down in terms of level of effort, because frankly, the AI is going to do it for you. And what does that look like from a data engineering perspective, a hygiene perspective, and a marketing perspective? The level of effort obviously comes down.
Got it. And so if I were to extend that, like one of my biggest beefs with this entire ecosystem is the lack of horizontality, right? So each of these platforms gives you an incredible depth to do analysis within their own walls. But the moment I take it out, I get some aggregate gobbledygook, which doesn't really help me say, okay, I did this in Google. I learned this about search behavior. Now I'm going to deploy it within the Amazon world differently.
Yeah.
And by the time I actually figure that out, it takes a long time. Do you see AI being able to bridge some of those gaps? Because I just don't see the platforms changing their behavior. No one's passing any standards and no one's passing any legislation in that space. So it seems like AI is the only hope of getting to these horizontal across MarTech and ad tech solutions. Because the other issue is you're doing something completely with your call center, your stores, and all of that, none of which gets passed along to this other side, which is just putting ads out. So is there hope that AI will help solve the problem if we let it?
Yeah. So I definitely think there's hope, right? I think AI is the great equalizer when it comes to, data sets, access to data, data engineering, right? I think proving out the value becomes the test for marketers, right? I think you're still going to have to broker access, obviously, to those data sets, and then the ability to leverage them to move the needle and show there's value. I think that'll always be an enterprise challenge, frankly, but the technology exists to be able to cut across business units, cut across demand side, supply side. It enables you to, frankly, feed algorithms data that may or may not be useful, only to have it tell you how useful that data is. I think it, frankly, gives me a lot of hope that marketing and, to your point, call center operations, store operations, POS data, commerce data can all be brought together to truly get that 360-degree view of the customer, leveraging both a CDP and then a data science layer that you can sit on top of it in an effort to truly provide a personalized experience online, in-store, wherever you engage with them. I feel like AI enables that for the promise of it for all organizations.
It's almost like there's this multi-layered sandwich, but then over time, AI, as it learns, it sort of starts to eliminate some of those layers. And you just, of course, you gain in your efficiency and your effectiveness, but it also means hopefully there is a better consumer experience at the end of it, and that they're not subject to so many different ads, which they've already seen a million times.
Exactly.
What happens to companies that have not got those big data sets or do not have the data sets yet, which would feed these big LLMs? Most people think that AI has just come up now, but it's been around for 20, 30 years and it's been used for a long period of time. So I want to focus on, are the people that you work with, are they looking at things like few-shot learning methods where you look at smaller sets of data, customizing algorithms, being able to do small little things, but to do it well? And therefore, there is hope actually for companies that may not have these big data layers and data foundations like many others do.
Yeah, we've seen, to your point, as little as under 100 attributes driving really effective models to predict what it is that customers want. So just yesterday, I was at a major movie studio and they had asked us to take some data, figure out the IP that sits in their vault, and use the AI to generate what are the products that people would want to buy relative to the IP that exists already, right? So look at our existing title library, use, publicly available information about those titles in order to move the needle on consumer product creation. And with 92 elements of data points, attributes around each of those titles, we were able to come up with a list of over 500 million product recommendations, with over half of those having a 60% or higher propensity for fans of titles to buy. So 92
cool.
is a set of
92 attributes. And what was like the sample size? Like if 92 were the number of rows, how many columns did you have?
So their movie title library is probably going to give it away here. No, I'm kidding. Their movie title library isn't that deep, so it probably 500 titles and we only looked at movies.
Wow.
Television. We didn't look at animation, so 500.
I just feel like repeating that 92 attributes across 500 titles, and you came up with 500 million product recommendations with 60% greater propensity. That is amazing.
No, 50% or higher had a 60% propensity for people to purchase, right? So I think when people think they need these massive sets of data to be able to do the prediction, it takes a literal handful in terms of the ability.
Have you stuck this on billboards everywhere? Like, why do I not see billboards announcing saying, you guys are why are you running behind these big, large data sets? You don't need it.
The campaign is, hey, consumer products, movie industry, sports teams, don't be scared of it, right? With a handful of data, you can go make more effective decisions about your business in a way that a year ago you couldn't, right? So pretty standard. I mean, to be honest, it was an Excel spreadsheet and a Python script that we did in order to, right? It doesn't even have
Don't give it away. Don't give it away.
It doesn't have to be massive, right?
Yep.
Generative AI models that you need in order to create it.
Correct. So let me bring in another topic which is related to AI, which kind of worries me, because I remember 10, 12 years ago, maybe even earlier, when social media first came on the scene, and all of us in the media world were like, yes, this is it. We're now going to connect better with people. There's going to be great content. We're going to be able to marry content with who they are and give them exactly what they want. And this is going to be superb. And we collectively as an industry, me included, so I'm not to be excused in any way, but I remember the battles I would have internally saying, I need to be the one buying Facebook because that's the one where you saw all the growth in billings, the growth in revenue, etc. And then you realize that we ended up with an ecosystem that funded a lot of things that we didn't like. Yeah. That today we're kind of in a gray area where we're not really sure whether everything that we did was the right thing for people. And if you step back and you say brands are about the people they serve, they're not about the media they use to reach those people, right? How do you make sure that when your clients sort of say we need to use AI, that you always keep the consumer in mind and make sure we don't recreate the mess that we created with social media? What are some of the things we should, as an industry, be cognizant of?
So first, I think the look back on social media is an interesting one, right? To your point around we're going to give people exactly what they want. I think we were missing that last, and probably still are because not everybody's figured it out. We were missing that last mile of content creation that was dynamic, that we could leverage AI to create, the 10,000 variable components, right? So the holy grail was always, what is the background? What is the tone of voice? What is the imagery? What is the, overlay? Those tools to create a personalized experience at scale on social have just now come around in the last, I think, 6 to 9 months. So to be able to say, Michelle, a segment of one, that capability is hot off the press, right? So while social had the value chain of outreaching to you, the execution of truly dynamic social media for that segment of one just created scale, right? So you wound up with segments and cohorts getting the same message versus me as Michelle getting the personalized message. I think that just recently in the last 6 months with generative content capabilities and image generation. Copy generation is generative AI specific, right? So I think that promise of social was missing the piece that exists now, which is, to your point, AI as the promise of closing that loop for us to ensure that it is personalized, to ensure that it is specific to me, Michelle, a segment of one, right? So, but to your question, how do we prevent that kind of, let's say, schism social created leveraging AI? I think a couple things. One, trustworthy AI in the process. So do we have diversity in people who are developing these algorithms, right? How do we ensure that our unconscious bias aren't introduced into the algorithm creation? How do we ensure that underrepresented populations are doing the development and the coding? I think is part of the let's fix the problem we had last time of ensuring we're introducing diversity from the beginning versus trying to bolt it on at the end. I think that's important.
And, one of the things that is also very closely related to this is what the US government has done, and then the Europeans have done it, where they're looking increasingly at legislation to regulate AI. But there are also these different data laws and privacy laws that have been passed in various states and will continue to get passed in various states.
Yeah.
Do you think there is any reason for marketers to fear that many of these consumer signals are going to go away with the implementation of this? Or do you think they're pivoting around and realizing that they need a much more active, direct relationship with consumers to emphasize the value exchange that could take place?
Well, we've long said, regardless of the deprecation of third-party cookies, we've long said you had to get your first-party data house in order. And then how you augment that with second and third-party data could follow. But to your point, I think marketers absolutely know that the surefire way to ensure you're communicating and engaging with the right audience, that you have to do that in a compliant way that is GDPR, CCPA, fill in the, states accordingly, Virginia and others. I think they've known that for a while, and we've been beating that drum for 5+ years, to be honest, that you had to get that straight and you had to have that relationship established and maintained and nurtured in a way that provided consumers with meaningful engagement, that they continued to share their PII with you. That has long been our stance. And I think marketers do understand that and have been making strides against it. Now, as it relates to consumers, I absolutely believe that in this day and age of all the data is available for algorithms and use, etc., consumers absolutely need the ability to protect their own privacy, to opt out, to forget me. All the components of CCPA, I think, are only going to continue to proliferate across states until, at least within the US is going to have to do something at the federal level that says, these are the standards and here's how you apply them, because a 50-state, per state version of CCPA is going to make it really hard for marketers to be able to execute against. And then only calling upon, Congress to pass legislation that enables us to do that at the federal level, I think is probably right around the corner.
Got it. So since you live in the great state of California.
Speaking of,
let me ask you this question. Have you ever used the provisions of the CCPA to get yourself off of pesky lists, etc.? And have you found it useful?
I have, as a marketing technologist, to see that it worked in order to help advise clients. And specifically the forget me version of, there's definitely opting out and my preferences. Those things I think are well-worn paths in MarTech and ad tech stack. I think, that for brands had kind of been the priority. But where I think it started to fall apart was data portability and forget me provisions, which is a little bit more difficult. I think it's difficult because for marketers, it sometimes requires technical capability. It requires coordination with an agency if they've outsourced it. And that kind of value chain of, hey, I want all the data you've collected about me as a brand and provide it to me in a portable way so I can take it elsewhere. I've seen brands be really successful at it. And I've also seen brands scramble to meet the regulation and the timing requirement of that. And then the forget me provision, same thing. If in order to find me in all of your databases across your first, second, and third party tiers of data, it requires the same touch point. Now, the promise of deleting me from your databases, advising me of where I was, that is sometimes very difficult for marketing and IT to identify the proliferation, hence the need for identity resolution, a 360-degree view, a unique identifier, so that when you do proliferate me through systems, that you can find me and you can honor my request to forget me and or to provide me with my data.
It's ironic, isn't it? The only way I can get myself off of a database is for the database to know who I am so it can take me off. It just never ceases to amaze me that they've created one such thing. I feel like I can keep talking to you about AI for like the next few days. But
I feel like we could talk about every day I see something that blows my mind that I am just like so excited for the future for marketers in particular, because it's going to fundamentally change the way that they work, that provides them with an effectiveness level that I think advising the C-suite is going to provide them with a level of data and transparency that historically, to quote the Wanamaker adage, 50% of my advertising works, I just don't know which one. I think that stops now because I'm going to know exactly what works, and the ability for CMOs to advise the CFO and the CEO becomes table stakes conversation about data and effectiveness and transparency that heretofore didn't exist.
Well, on that note, let's stop here. But coming up next time on FairPlay, Michelle and I will talk about the current state of women in tech and the future of marketing agencies.
Do you think that AI eliminates the need for marketers to leverage a third-party agency?
I would say this. The only reason why I think you would still need agencies is if the ecosystem is not adjusted away from the model of scale. The only reason I'm going to big groups to buy media from is because I expect to get a better deal than if I just went individually.
This has been Fair Play with Arun Kumar. If you want to uncover the keys to using data wisely and fairly in an ever-changing world, go to arunkumar.com for more insights and resources. Fair Play is a production of Forbes Books.